So there was this mother who had to go out right after dinner. So she had a meeting, and so her husband and the kids decided they wanted to be helpful, cleaned up the food, put it away, took care of the dishes, wiped off the counter to make everything look real good. After the mother came home from her meeting, she noticed the kitchen and how nice it looked, and came into the living room where her husband and kids are, and said hi to them. And her husband, after a little bit, said, "Did you see we cleaned up the kitchen?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "Did we do a good job?" She said, Yeah, you did." He said, "Do you want to thank you?" And she said, "Do you thank me every other time when I do it?" It is easy sometimes to forget to appreciate, to give thanks. And so it's good that we have days like Mother's Day to give thanks for mothers, but hopefully, like other holidays, Thanksgiving isn't the only day we ought to be thankful. Easter isn't the only day we celebrate the risen Christ. Mother's Day shouldn't be the only day that we celebrate and appreciate mothers, but we do especially on this day. So I wanted to do something special. I was thinking about what a blessing moms are, and I chose a passage of Scripture that I want to read to you, but I need to kind of set it up a little bit first from the book of Proverbs. So the book of Proverbs is generally connected with the Old Testament King Solomon, and as you might expect, Proverbs is full of proverbs. It's mostly just these little one-liner kind of thoughts in scattered different directions. In fact, one of the only cohesive sections is the final chapter, chapter 31. And the beginning of chapter 31 describes it as the advice from King Lemuel's mother to him about a good wife and a good mother. The only challenge with that is we have the whole history of all the kings of Israel, and none of them were named Lemuel. It's thought that this might have been like a pet name that Solomon's mother had for him, but what's probably more likely is because Lemuel in Hebrew means devoted to God, that the 31st chapter is meant as instruction for any king who wants to be devoted to God of what to look for in a wife and a mother. So I should highlight as well, sometimes people have looked at Proverbs 31 as kind of prescriptive. Well, this is what wives and mothers need to be like. But we have to recognize it's 2,500 years old, and so a little dated. Some of the references in it don't make as much sense, and society has changed a whole lot since then. I think what it actually works much better as is as a celebration, as a reminder to be thankful for mothers. I also don't mean it to be just prescriptive, because I think it would be bad for me as a guy to stand up and say to moms, "Here's how you should mother." I would never do that. So I think it's just a good passage to celebrate motherhood. So let me read it to you. And as I do, think about, see if it jogs some celebration, some thankfulness that you have for your own mother or those who have been mothers for you in your life. So Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31, "A capable wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings food from far away. She rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and tasks for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid for her household when it snows, for all her household are clothed in crimson. She makes herself coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the city gates, taking his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She supplies the merchant with sashes. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her happy, her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her a share in the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the city gates. See what I mean? It's a wonderful celebration of mothers. It kind of reminds us of many of those things that we might be thankful for. In fact, as I've read this over, and you may have kind of gathered this as you listened or when you've read it before, there are some themes that come through to be thankful for in this passage. So one of those is for a good wife. It starts with that relationship of wife and mother. And so there's all kinds of passages, a capable wife who can find. I love the little description, she is far more precious than jewels. Describes a good wife. And one of those kind of descriptions that we sometimes hear is of the woman behind the man. That many men, and I know this, and lots of guys will say, well, that's through the support, the encouragement of my wife that I am who I am. Whenever I think of the woman behind the man, I always get the image of Eleanor Roosevelt. One of those amazing ladies, a lady of great accomplishments in her own right, often listed in most admired people in our country near the top of the list. Just an amazing lady. She changed the role single-handedly of First Lady into something significant. She was known as an advocate for other women. She helped change labor laws, especially for children. She looked out for the rights of people of color. She was our first United Nations delegate. Just an amazing lady, but also an incredible lady behind her husband, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When Franklin had polio, his medical doctor credited Eleanor for being the reason that he survived, for the care and the love that she poured on him. And after he was done with the polio and ended up being paralyzed, there were his advisors, especially his mother, who said that he should leave politics. And Eleanor said, no, you still have much to give, even in this condition. And of course, Franklin was the one that led us, our great president, through World War II. But with the help of his wife, his capable, good wife, Eleanor. So we see that in Proverbs 31, but we also hear about a hard-working mother. In fact, there's more in this scripture passage about a hard-working mother than anything else. Now, some of the references are a little bit, difficult to understand. We're not quite sure. Wool and flax. It mentions the distaff and the spindle, things used for making clothing. Again, it's a passage that describes motherhood many, many years ago. But that image of a hard-working mother is absolutely there. In fact, when I went looking for some images on the screen, I found all these T-shirts that just kind of describe and remind us of the hard-working mother. It made me think of all the devotions of mothers I've known in congregations I've served here and many, many others. Made me think about a wonderful saint we lost in this last year, Carolyn Mitchell, whose husband passed away when when her son Bruce was still young, and as we were preparing for the funeral, Bruce remembered how, because his dad was gone, his mom learned to throw a football and a baseball and, do the things that she would have expected a husband to do, filled in all of those ways. It made me think about women in our congregation who have stepped into the role of mother. For one reason or another, someone wasn't able to do that, and so an aunt or a grandmother or a family friend stepped in and was in that role that was needed as a hard-working mother. It made me think about it. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my own mom. One of the things I realized I never thanked my mom for, she paid for college for both my sister and I, went back to work, and I don't know that it ever dawned on her. If it did, she certainly never mentioned it to me. The day after day, she went to work to put it in a bank account, to give it away for my sister and I for our college tuitions. She did that for years without complaint or comment. Moms just pour out so much, and so that's a thing to be thankful for as well. And then the scripture also, just in one verse, reminds us that moms are those who serve those in need. That verse, she opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Made me think about it, and I think I've commented on this, usually in the Christmas season, about Mary, the mother of Jesus. Some have noted that in the Gospel of Luke, there's this wonderful song of praise that Mary sings, and one of the things that it does is it highlights those who are in need, those who are broken, those who are shut out. And then, of course, we know in Jesus' ministry, he went out of his way to love and care for those who are broken or were in need. And we wonder, is this where Jesus first learned to love everyone, especially those who are in need? Did he learn this from his own mother, to reach out and care for those who are in need? And then Proverbs 31 also, I don't know how else to describe it except as a woman of inner depth. These few verses, that strength and dignity are her clothing. It's right after it describes her making clothing, but her clothing are strength and dignity. She laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is in her tongue. There's just an inner depth that we give thanks for this morning as well. There's a story of a young girl who goes and she says to her mom, "Mom, I know what I'm going to be when I grow up." Of course, her mom is interested. She says, "Mom, I'm going to be a doctor and a lawyer and a scientist and an archaeologist and an actress." And her mom says, "Wow, that's pretty amazing. You're going to do all of those things. Do you think you might be a mom as well?" And the little girl says, "Oh, no, that's too hard." There is just that inner depth that we give thanks for as well, that inner strength. When I think about how proud I am of how my two sons have turned out, I realize how much of that is a credit to my wife. That inner strength that she's passed on to them. And one of our members made me realize, I never really thought about this, but a lot of who I am as well is that strength and that inner strength that my wife has passed on to me as well. She's helped shape me into the person that I am. And so I'm thankful, and I'm sure you're thankful for that, and mothers in your life as well. And then one more thing, if you're listening in that scripture passage from Proverbs 31, we also hear about a godly woman, a godly woman. There's that wonderful verse, so poetic, that charm is deceitful and beauty can fade, it's vain, but a woman who fears, who respects, who has awe of the Lord is to be praised, is to be praised. And I know there's many, many folks, many here this morning, who would say, I'm a person of faith. I started my faith journey because of my mom bringing me to church and helping me to grow. And I know there are many folks who will look at that faith that their moms have passed on to them. Made me think this week, if you read Christian news, you may have heard about the passing of a great woman Christian leader, Rachel Held Evans. Sad story. Passed away at the age of 37 of an infection that just, cascaded into all kinds of medical challenges. Rachel Held Evans was somebody, I'd read her blog every once in a while, and I kept thinking, I got to get around to buying one of her books. She was a woman who wrote and thought deeply about being a devoted Jesus follower, but also how confusing and difficult the faith journey is, that it needs to include everyone, and there need to be places to question and wrestle. She was such an amazing leader in that way. This past week, I thought, I'm going to buy one of her books just in celebration, one of her audio books of this amazing godly women, like so many godly women who have passed on and helped us think about faith in new ways. We give thanks for that in all those different ways that Proverbs lifts up moms and those that it doesn't. We celebrate and give thanks for this morning.